Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the BBG, and we have ourselves a different one here today. I wanted to welcome in the new year with just something that I found an absolutely phenomenal read. I just had to share it. It's absolutely a hidden gem, so don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to see 9,000 subscribers soon, and that's going to be absolutely amazing. But the phenomenal read, it begins with SSS Class Suicide Hunter. Now, as the name suggests, it's pretty dark. The start alone is incredibly just depressing. The MC is an absolute F-tier trash who wants to be like the people that he sees on TV pretty much. And that's fine and all, but I mean it is depressingly negative. This man is borderline losing his mind being weak. So of course, plot armor comes in and he ends up gaining a skill literally from the level that his jealousy reaches. It's funny in a lot of ways, and it's kind of sad in some other ways, but, moving on. After finally getting an S-tier skill, he goes and celebrates and ends up running into the very people that he basically envies and sees them doing bad things. He, of course, gets caught seeing something that he shouldn't have, tries to talk his way out of it, but of course, inevitably just gets murdered. Because might makes right. Now, it should be said this manhwa is incredibly popular. It is insanely popular. And it is for good reason, but it is also dark, as I said before. This man's jealousy and desire to be powerful is so strong that this man literally killed himself for over 4,000 times to go back in time for 24 hours for each one of his deaths. That's insane, first of all. Absolutely spectacular premise though. But every time he dies to something, he literally just steals a skill from them. It is ridiculously overpowered, but I know you're probably wondering, BBG, why are you talking about this? This manhwa is literally a tower climbing storyline with flaws and all that. It's even got skills, it's got statuses. What do you mean this is a hidden Wuxia storyline? And you would be correct, this is a tower climbing, beat the floors, status kind of story, but that's not the point, okay? Bear with me. That was really just giving you the backstory so you can understand the type of person the MC is. From here on out, he's the real gem, the hidden gem, the absolute diamond hidden in a pile of shit. Although that's harsh. That is harsh. Mostly because I've read this whole thing. But let me get into the point. From chapter 54 onwards, this story just absolutely transforms, and it transforms because of the way the floors work in the manhwa itself. Each floor is like its own entire world sort of thing, and you got to pass things in order to get to an ending of the world, I suppose, is one way to look at it. But the point is, from chapter 54 onwards, this just takes an absolute 90-degree turn into Wuxia land. Now, technically it's Murim, but you can argue with me in the comments if you don't think Murim is Wuxia. But just let me get to my point first, okay? Now, for those of you that have followed the channel for a while, I also like zombies. So this was really just 2 nails straight into my serotonin producer in my brain. But for the purposes of this being a hidden gem of a storyline, ignore the zombies, okay? Just pretend they're not there. They're not a massive part of the storyline, but they're there. The point is, this storyline, chapters 54 to 79, is probably one of the most well-told storylines in Wuxia I've ever read, frankly speaking. And I mean this in terms of how they act and the way things are described. So you do have the orthodox and unorthodox factions, which is just an absolutely classic setting, because it always comes down to the unorthodox and orthodox factions, right? But in this case, this story is completely focused pretty much entirely on the unorthodox faction, and is probably the best description of unorthodox techniques I've ever read as well. It's even filled with just so much philosophical talk as well. It's simple, but it's so profound. Now, obviously, the man on the right here is the orthodox faction, the woman on the left is the unorthodox faction, and they've been fighting for years. Standard stuff. But the world has ended for them, and that's why the whole tower is put on a floor for them, and he has to solve it as the MC. But that's, again, it's not the point here. The point is what he learns from this world and how he gets stronger. So, he decides to start learning the unorthodox techniques. And all of these heavenly demon techniques, they all boil down to the senses and experiences of the person. Which, this stuff's always touched on in novels and that, when it comes to You got to experience something before you can show its full power, sort of thing. And this story really just encompasses that in a nutshell. For him to be able to actually use the techniques that she's trying to teach him, he's got to use multiple lives. It's the only reason he can even learn any of this stuff. But he's got to actually experience everything. Like when he uses one of his sword techniques, it's called the Sword of the Drowned, but it has no power unless you've personally experienced drowning. And this crazy dude decides to live through like 100 lifetimes of drowning. So he obviously gets an amazing source of power in that. Same thing with Sword of Freezing. There's obviously more. I can't show you all of them because it's just gonna ruin it for you. But the point is, not a lot of novels, not a lot of manhwas put emphasis on the experience behind the technique. They just like, here's a technique, oh, I can do it, I'm a genius. This is like, no, you gotta know it, you gotta experience it, you gotta understand it. I mean, frankly speaking, hunger was like one of the saddest ones to read about, and make no mistake, you're gonna cry if you read this. I'm just being honest with you. There's gonna be tears, whether they're inside or outside, there will be tears. But going through each of these things as the story progresses was just an absolutely amazing journey. I first started reading this back in 2021, but it hadn't finished coming out, and I recently went back to it like a couple months ago, and obviously read up to chapter 75, or 79 I should say, and I was just, oh man, I was blown away by it. I wish I could forget it so that I could read it again. Because it's just so descriptive. Learn the form of death by starvation and then death by dehydration is just, it's so encompassing of an unorthodox sect, but without it being just evil, you know? Which has always bothered me when it comes to unorthodox and orthodox, but that's a different conversation. It's just so good. You need to learn to swing your sword from thirst, becoming able to cut with a single strike those who have never experienced real thirst. So good. But that aside, let's really get into what his master is like. And this was another thing that is just like, she is by far the best master I've ever seen when it comes to teaching someone. I mean, sure, she goes insane a little bit and kind of kills everyone once or twice. But, you know, no one's perfect, okay? No one's perfect. Now, of course, there is still, like, some comedy mixed in with all of this. Honestly, the way the unorthodox and orthodox head leaders treat each other throughout this entire storyline until the end is absolutely hilarious. It is 10 out of 10 comedy, 10 out of 10 character development. My God, 10 out of 10 plot. I'm getting ahead of myself. This entire storyline is immersed in what makes Wuxia Wuxia. Like, these two people represent the peak of martial arts in their world, basically. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't take a step into Xianxia or anything like that, gods and demons. You could argue the rest of the story is with the way the tower functions, but again, that's a different conversation. We're not going to get into that. I'm only here to give you a lovely, delicious treat for the new year in the form of a hidden Wuxia storyline, and that's what I'm going to deliver you. Now, make no mistake, this entire arc is absolutely tragic. It is filled with such profound lessons, but also with just such tragedy. But I'm not going to spoil too much here because I don't want to spoil anything major. The point is, this story is just absolutely worth reading. It's so innocuously hidden behind this random ass manhwa SSS class suicide hunter that I never thought I'd just find something like this. I think that every single time from now until the future, every single time I see this image, I'm going to get a wellspring of emotion just come up from inside me and remember this entire storyline, because I said it before and I'll say it again. I wish I could forget reading this storyline just so I could experience it again. I would do things for that, man. I would do things for that. But I've taken up enough of your time. I didn't want this to be too long. This is my New Year's gift. Go and read it. Come back and comment what you thought about the chapters 54 to 79. I'd be very curious to see if I'm just completely alone in my analysis here, but it is literally one of the best Wuxia storylines I've ever read. And I need to know if other people think the same. So with that said, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Again, leave us a comment. Tell me what you think about this little storyline. It's only 25 chapters. Shouldn't take you too long to read. I expect to find out what you think about this as soon as you've read it. No pressure. But as always, enjoy the story. Have a wonderful new year and have a great day.